Hello, good people. It is great to be with you. And today I want to talk to you about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is chickens and eggs. Okay, I want to talk to you about the ethics of eggs, the ethics of egg production, and maybe your relationship with the chickens whose eggs you eat on a regular basis. The first thing I want to say about the ethics of chickens and eggs is that I have a priority when it comes to this ethical question, and the priority is human nutrition. So I would put human nutrition at the top of the priority, and I would put animal welfare, that is the welfare of the chickens, second. I believe that that is the right ordering of these priorities. In a perfect world, there would not be any conflict between human nutrition and animal welfare. And unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. And oftentimes there are conflicts and difficult decisions that have to be made. However, that being said, I do not believe there is any circumstance in which there can be an excuse for gratuitous mistreatment or cruelty to animals, and animal misery being created simply for the sake of some small increase in profit seems to me to be quite a bad thing. Now, what exactly is the role of eggs in human nutrition? Well, for one thing, eggs are a complete protein just like meat is. All right, they contain fats, vitamins, and protein. They contain carotenoids. Those are the same colorful compounds that are found in many plants. And many of these compounds are very important nutrients, some of them such as lutein, that are important for the health of eyes and for the brain. So eggs are a very good nutritional value, especially for people on a limited income, and they're especially good nutritional value often for older people. The consumption of eggs can help to retain brain health as one ages. They also can be kept without refrigeration, and for that reason, they can be kept for a number of days without refrigeration. And for that reason, they are very important nutritional components of the diet of people who do not have access to refrigeration. Eggs help baked goods to be both more palatable, and they increase the shelf life of baked goods. So they are an important component in other things that people eat besides just the eggs themselves. Eggs are easily assimilated by the young, by the elderly, and by people who are ill. And so they can often be taken in when other sources of protein, such as meat or even legumes and beans and things like that, would have difficulty being digested. Now here is an egg from one of my hens, and people are often surprised when I say this, but when you think about it for a minute, you'll realize that you actually know this. This egg is a single cell, okay? Now, sometimes people go, what? Yes, it's a single cell. Think about it. The eggs that are produced by mammals, and eggs, of course, are produced by women as well, are single cells, right? Then they're fertilized, and then they begin to multiply and become a multicellular creature. So every egg is a single cell. Now, the egg of a bird, the egg of an egg-laying animal, has to be larger. Why? Because it is not only the gamete, it is not only it has to have its role in sexual reproduction, but because it's going to exit the body of the animal, it also has to function the same way the womb does in a mammal. It has to function as the home for the developing embryo. So it is both the gamete and, in a sense, an external womb for that developing chick. Quite an interesting and amazing thing, I think eggs are. Okay. Oh, and that brings up another point. Just as a woman would release an egg every month herself from her body, even if she is not connected to a man, a chicken, a hen, will lay eggs even if she does not have any contact with a rooster. A lot of people don't realize that. Now, of course, the eggs are not fertilized if she hasn't had contact with a rooster, and so they would never develop into chicks. Now, when you go to the grocery store and you see all the cartons of eggs, you see a lot of different names on the cartons. This is a rather new phenomenon in the past few years. Used to be years ago when you went to the store, you only saw eggs, and then you had your choice was really just the size of the eggs. So you had regular eggs, the large eggs, it'd say grade A large eggs, and then you had jumbo eggs, and then you'd have medium and small eggs, and all of the eggs were white, and that was basically the only choice that you had. So in recent years, the choices available to consumers have really expanded. So I want to talk a little bit about what it says on these egg cartons and what it means. Okay, so I also want to talk to you about the price differential just a little bit. So regular grade A eggs right now, and I know some people have complained that egg prices are going up right now. It seems like there's a little bit of price gouging going on. I think because meat has been kind of been either delayed getting to the stores, or people have been buying it up quicker than usual, and so for that reason, the next protein source that people want to go for is eggs. And so I think there's been a little bit of jacking up of the prices on those in recent days, but I think you can expect that to probably go back to normal pretty soon, because there's no shortage of chickens, and the same number of chickens are still laying eggs as were before. The coronavirus has not affected the production of eggs in any way. Okay, so regular grade A large eggs, generally speaking, cost about 10 cents a piece. So you're going to see a carton of them, a dozen of them, will be somewhere around from $1.19 to $1.39. They're going to hover right there and around that 10 cents per egg or $1.20 per dozen price, give or take a few cents here and there. You'll pay a little more if the eggs are jumbo, and a little less if the eggs are small, are medium or small. You'll also pay a little more if you buy eggs in a 6-pack. I don't know why anybody would bother to do that. I guess if someone is single and they are living by themselves and they hardly ever eat eggs, they might buy a 6-pack. But if you buy a smaller quantity like that, you're going to pay a little more per egg. If you buy them in an 18-pack, then you'll pay a little less per egg because of buying them in quantity. Okay, but basically that's a 10-cent egg, right? All right, now you're going to see the second level up in price on the regular size eggs are the cage-free eggs. Those are about 20 cents an egg, so they run between around $2.49 to $2.79 for a dozen. Next thing you'll see are eggs that are called free-range eggs. Those run around 37 to 40 cents an egg, so they're around $4.50 a dozen or so. Then you have pastured eggs, and pastured eggs range anywhere from around 45 cents an egg to a little over 50 cents an egg. So that's about, they range from around $5.50 to close to $7 per dozen. All right. Now you can add a premium to any of these kinds of eggs. You'll add a premium of about 10 cents or so per egg if that says organic on the label. Now the organic refers to what the chicken is fed, because of course in a sense you could say all eggs are organic. It's not like they're made of glass or something. So when you see organic on the label of an egg carton, it means that the chickens were fed organic food. You can also add a slight premium if the eggs are brown. For some reason, people have it in their head that brown eggs are better than white eggs, although actually there isn't any difference in that. Now, there's some other strange labeling that you'll get on egg cartons, and one of them is something new that's just recently come out in the stores, and it's these things called heritage eggs, and those run about 65 cents an egg, or about $8 a dozen. I don't know whose heritage they're talking about. The eggs are blue and dark brown eggs, and there. So if you need eggs for a craft project, they might be real nice. They might be a nice little thing to get. But as for generally eating, there's no difference in those eggs from any other eggs. Um, the the reason why there are chickens that lay blue or even greenish eggs is because those were chickens that were developed in South America over many years. In South America, the chickens, we just have our chickens in Europe and America lay white and brown eggs, but down there it just happened to have chickens that lay these other colored eggs, and gradually people brought them to the United States, and among people who raise chickens, they call them Easter eggers, and so anybody can have chickens that lay those eggs. But there's nothing particularly, there's no nutritional difference based upon the color of the eggshell at all. Now, some people think if they're called heritage, that somehow or another these are special breeds of chickens that are maybe they're trying to promote the breeds, and really that's really not the case. There are breeds of chickens that people are trying to promote, but but one way not to promote a breed of chickens is to eat the eggs, right? Because if you're trying to increase the number of a breed of chickens, what you want to do really is you want to hatch the eggs out. And so that's not really, I don't think there's really anything special about those breeds of chickens at all. It's just a name they put on it to make you think it's something special. And then they charge $8 a dozen. Amazing. Okay, now there's one unique set of cartons that you'll see that I really want you to be aware of, because it's even more, I think, of a marketing scheme than the heritage eggs, and that is the Eggland's Best Eggs. All right, they have all kinds of claims on their label. They put this little like thing that looks like a gold sticker for some kind of reward or something on their carton. They don't just say, grade A, there's like grade A best eggs or best grade A eggs, like as though that was some sort of actual USDA category. And it's not, it's all marketing. There is nothing special about their eggs. There's nothing particularly extra nutritious about their eggs and all of that. There are a number of different egg companies that have worked to increase the omega-3 component of the chicken egg, and if you're worried about that, you need to have more omega-3s in your diet and you have no other source for it or something like that, and you want to add omega-3 eggs, I guess you could spend the extra money to do that. I would see that as kind of a wasteful thing, but if that's how you want to go, you can go ahead and do that. But the claims that Eggland's Best makes about its eggs really seem to be quite elaborate and quite more of a marketing scheme than anything else. There's been a lot of trouble between consumer groups and Eggland's Best, and they are not very forthcoming about things such as what kind of conditions their chickens are kept on and things like that. Which brings me to another point, and that is all of these words that we went over that you see on the package, from just the regular eggs, cage-free, free-range, and pastured, all of these words have something to do with the conditions that the chickens are kept in. And I want to talk to you about that for just a moment. Okay. Regular eggs that you buy in a store these days are from chickens that are kept in the United States. This is not true in Europe, because in Europe they don't have this practice anymore. But in the United States, they are kept in what are called battery cages. Battery cage is a kind of a long cage that can hold about 10 or 12 chickens. And the cages are stacked up. They're stacked up on top of one another. That's why it's called a battery. They're stacked up on top and they're put in rows. So you can have a warehouse full of them, and it's just, stack after stack of chickens all the way down these long aisles. And then underneath the cage, there is usually some sort of slanted board or something, so the eggs roll down into like a little track, and then they roll down and can be collected. And the chickens themselves have very little space. So the cages are just a little bit, the size of the cages are just a little bit above the heads of the chicken. So they cannot really stand up to their full and stretch out to their full extent of their neck and spread out their wings or anything like that. They're kept quite closely confined. And the reason is that they don't want the chickens climbing over one another and damaging one another, which they would do if they had room in the cage to move around very much. They also keep the chickens in lighting that is just, it's the minimal amount of lighting that will keep the chickens awake and laying eggs, but not dark enough to really go into full night at nighttime for the chickens to sleep normally. Nor is it usually sunlight, it's artificial light. The chickens are generally fed the minimal amount of food for their diet that will keep them producing eggs. Now, here's the thing to understand about eggs and nutrition in chickens. An egg is supposed to become a baby chicken in nature. That's the intent of nature on the egg, is that it will become a new chicken, right? So the egg has to contain the nutritional components that would permit a chick to, if the egg were fertilized, it would permit a chick to grow. So there's a natural limit to how little nutrition you can give the chicken and she would still produce eggs. So she has to have a minimal amount of nutrition herself, or she will not produce any eggs. However, that amount of nutrition that keeps her producing eggs is not necessarily good nutrition for her body. You can think about a woman who has poor nutrition. She can still give birth to a healthy baby, but what happens? How does that baby get produced from the woman with poor nutrition? It's because the baby is going to take from the nutrition of the mother. So for example, if a woman is getting enough calcium when she is pregnant, it's her bones and her teeth that will go, and the calcium will be depleted from her body, and it's going to go into that baby. Same thing is true of these hens that are kept in these battery cages for laying eggs. The hens still produce an egg that, if fertilized, could become a chick, because if they weren't able to do that, they just would stop laying eggs. But the nutrition is not enough to optimally support the health of those chickens. So those chickens often have osteoporosis. They have many health problems themselves. They're very depleted. They are, not in good condition, but yet they're still laying eggs that are nutritional for you to eat, because the eggs would, if fertilized, actually hatch into a baby chick. So those are the conditions that the chickens are being kept in that are producing the eggs. Generally speaking, the regular eggs in a store. These chickens do not have a chance to express many of their natural instincts and their natural behaviors. They can't scratch around on ground, and they can't roll around on ground and take dust baths, which is something chickens like to do. They don't have their normal flock communication that they would normally have in a group of chickens. They don't have a chance to, kind of run around and flap their wings and all of that stuff. They don't get outside in the sunlight, And that's one of the reasons why their bones are in such bad condition and they have so many broken bones. They are kept from being able to peck one another often by having the tip of their beak cut off when they are first hatched, which is certainly, you can imagine it would be a painful process. We do know that there are many nerve endings in their beaks, and yet at their first moment of life, the tip of their beak is cut off, and that's so that the beak won't be too sharp for them to do too much damage to each other in the cages. So those are the conditions that they are kept in. Now, when you recognize that these conditions in these battery cages are so terrible for the chickens, you might think, well, then I would certainly want to buy the box of eggs that says cage free, because you're thinking, cage free, we get them out of the cages and that's wonderful, then they can run around. Well, I just want to say that's not necessarily what you think it is. So cage-free chickens are not in the battery cages. And because they can't be stacked on top of one another, of course, you would pay more for the cage-free eggs, because cage-free chickens cannot be housed as tightly compact and stacked on top of each other as the chickens in the battery cages. However, the living conditions of the cage-free chickens are not necessarily much better than those of the chickens in the cages. It's true the chickens can move around more, they can flap their wings some, they can stretch out to their full height and length, and so in that aspect it's better. However, they're still kept in these same warehouse conditions. The lighting conditions, the feeding conditions that I mentioned are still the same. And in this case, they actually are able to do more damage to each other. Even with their beaks cut, they still are able to peck one another and harm one another, and they have a lot more injuries. They have a lot more broken bones than the chickens that are kept in the cages. The other thing about the large warehouse, these large warehouse type barns that these chickens are kept on, they have a concrete floor, and the chicken droppings all drop onto the floor. Now, if you were to walk into one of these facilities, your eyes and your nose would be immediately assaulted by the smell of ammonia from the chicken droppings. Think about it. You are what, 5-6 feet off the ground? What about a chicken? The chicken's head is only like a foot off of the ground. So imagine what its eyes and its nose are going through with the strong ammonia smell from the chicken manure or the chicken droppings that are on the floor of these facilities. So it's kind of a toss-up among people who really care about chickens. It's kind of a toss-up. What is better or what is worse? Is it worse for them to be in the cages and barely able to move? Or is it worse to be, constantly having their eyes and nose burning from the smell of this ammonia all the time and subjected to greater amounts of injury? It's kind of a toss-up. I don't know what you think about it. Okay, let me go on to the next thing you'll see on a label that has to do with the way that chickens are housed, and that is free range. Now you see free range and you think, oh good, these are chickens that get to go outside. Well, actually, in order to have the label free range on an egg carton, all it means is that the chickens have to have outdoor access. In other words, there has to be a door in the facility that theoretically can be opened. It doesn't actually have to ever be opened. It does not have to open onto grass. It can open onto a concrete pad. It can open onto a parking lot. There's no regulation saying what it has to open onto. And there's no specific amount of time or hours in a day or anything like that that chickens that are called free-range chickens have to be outside or even have access to the outside. Now, one thing I want you to think about is, Why would someone who has the possibility of opening a door to a facility, letting in fresh air and sunlight, why would they keep the door closed? Or why would they have it open not very often, perhaps, for the chickens? Well, consider the fact that if they open that door and the chickens can go out, lots of things can come in. You know, vermin can come in, mice, rats, snakes can come in. There's all kinds of things that can come into the building and that can be very hard to eradicate. Also, when the chickens go out, the chickens can be, there's a possibility of the chickens being subjected to various predators that might be around. So there can be reasons besides some sort of desire to be cruel to chickens why the owners of these facilities might be rather reluctant to have the chickens going back and forth. And the other thing about it is that when chickens are not used to something and something is new, they will be afraid of it. So even if you have one of these warehouse facilities, and let's say that right outside of it you have a beautiful pasture of grass, and you open the door and the chickens can go outside, it's not like they all go rushing outside. The chickens are not used to that outside. It looks new to them. It looks frightening. There may be wind blowing and things kind of blowing around, and it's scary to them. So it's not like they're necessarily going to go outside when they have never been outside. So the concept of free range really gives you a false idea of the life of those chickens. For the most part, your free range, so-called free range chickens are not living lives that are very different from the cage free. In some cases they are, you know, there is more access to the outdoors. In some cases there is access to actual grass, but generally speaking, their lives are not that much different from the cage-free chickens. Now I want to talk to you about pastured chickens, because that is the one that is the most expensive that you'll see in the store, pastured. Other than the heritage, which are neither organic nor pastured, but are $8 a carton, but your pastured eggs, remember, those are the ones that are going to be, on average, they're going to be around $6 a dozen. So we're talking 50 cents an egg, sometimes slightly more. So the pastured chickens have routine access to pasture. They pasture actual grass, makes up a significant part of their diet, grass and other plants that grow out in a pasture, as well as bugs, insects, mice, lizards, whatever's out there, slugs, whatever's out there in the environment that they find, earthworms, etc. So they have access to a much more natural diet. They have access to a much more natural way of life, in the sense that they can scratch in the ground, they can roll around and take dust baths, they can run around, they can flap their wings. The sunshine can shine on them, which is good for their bones, because like us, they have to convert vitamin D from the sun and get that into their bones to have strong bones. And so they have a much more of a natural chicken life. Some of the disadvantages that that you would have with the free range also apply, which is that it's difficult to have facilities with open doors and coops with open doors and animals going back and forth, and at the same time restrain the vermin like mice and rats and things like that have to be constantly battled. And they are also subject to a certain amount of predation. There may be, you know, predators in the air like eagles or hawks, or predators on the ground that have to be watched out for. But in general, we can say that their life is far superior, and they are far happier and healthier than chickens in any of the other conditions. So my own personal ethical decision works like this. I would say to you that if you can possibly afford to buy pastured eggs, please buy pastured eggs, because the life of those chickens is so far superior to the lives of the chickens that are producing the eggs that have anything else on the label. That's one thing. However, if you cannot afford, if you really honestly search your conscience and say, I cannot possibly afford pastured eggs, then I would say, go ahead and get the cheapest eggs that you can until you are in a position where you can afford the pastured eggs. Now that I hope you make the commitment to get the pastured eggs if you can possibly afford it, I want you to consider something else. What I want you to consider is what would be the economics of you having your own chickens and producing your own eggs. I don't think that you can possibly answer that question until you have made the commitment to buy the 50-cent a piece eggs. Here's the reason I say that. If you're making an assessment of what it would cost for you to have your own chickens and what it would cost in time and effort, in what it would cost in infrastructure that you might need to take care of the chickens, what it would cost in feed, etc. And if you're comparing the eggs that you would produce with 10-cent eggs, you're generally going to not think that you're going to come out ahead. However, if you've made a commitment to spend 50 cents an egg to buy those pastured eggs, then you might be able to see that you actually could come out ahead economically by having your own chickens. Well, when I come back, I'm going to talk to you about the some of the things to think through of having your own chickens. And I want to address the question of, could you have pastured eggs in your own backyard? So until we get together again, treat yourself as though you are someone you are responsible for helping, because you are responsible, so am I, and together we are making the world. Bye for now. Thanks so much for watching.